Lena Caldwell walked into the biggest math contest of her life with nothing but a pencil and a plan. 10 minutes later, whispers started, not about her answers, but her skin. By the end, her perfect score was called statistically impossible. She wasn't praised, she was accused, and when they erased her name from the winners list, they didn't know. She had evidence that could burn the whole system down. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The hall smelled faintly of varnished wood and pencil shavings. Rows of desks stretched across the polished gym floor like dominoes, each perfectly spaced, each waiting for a mind to make its mark. The banners overhead read, State High School Mathematics Championship. The silence before the storm. 16-year-old Lena Caldwell stood at the threshold of the gymnasium, her contest badge clipped neatly to the front of her navy blazer. Her natural curls were pulled into a high puff, clean and defiant. She clutched her graphing calculator like a talisman, though she knew she wouldn't need it for most of what she had planned. She didn't come to guess. She came to win. Students trickled into the room in clusters, mostly white, mostly male, chatting about their prep coaches, Ivy League interviews, and last year's scores. Lena walked alone. Her school, Dunbar Magnet High, didn't have the resources for prep coaches. Her mother worked 2 jobs to buy the test packet from last year. Lena taught herself. Table at in 14. Her seat. Mid-row. Far enough from the judge's table to avoid direct attention, but not so far back she'd be forgotten. She liked it that way. She unpacked her supplies methodically. 2 sharpened pencils, 1 eraser, 1 silent stopwatch, a sealed bottle of water. She placed her laminated entry card beside her answer booklet. Like a declaration, Lena Caldwell, grade 11, Dunbar Magnet, District 6. Judges drifted by like birds of prey, eyes scanning for phones, smartwatches, illicit notes. One of them paused at Lena's desk longer than necessary. A tall man, maybe in his 50s, white, red tie, clipboard. He didn't speak, but Lena caught the slight wrinkle of his nose before he walked on. She'd seen that look before. At 9 a.m. sharp, the proctor's voice boomed through the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, you have 60 minutes. You may begin. Page 1. Lena's fingers didn't hesitate. She was already 2 steps ahead, visualizing the answer before her pencil even touched paper. The early questions were warm-ups, modular arithmetic, simple proof logic. She moved through them like wind through curtain. At minute 10, a ripple moved through the room. Heads began to turn, not subtly, one by one, toward her. Lena didn't notice at first. She was too deep into the combinatorics problem on page 3, but when she reached for her eraser and caught a glimpse of the student across from her mouth, open slightly, brows furrowed, it tugged her out of her flow. She looked up. 2 students whispered behind cupped hands. One leaned back and pointed, not at her work, but at her. A girl on the far end of the row narrowed her eyes, scribbled something on her scratch paper, and then shot Lena a long look. Lena glanced around the room. Was someone doing something unusual? No, it was just her. She looked down at her paper again. Maybe she was imagining it. She wasn't. By minute 20, the whispers had turned to murmurs. Not loud enough to alert a proctor, but deliberate, murky, a suspicion thickening in the air. Lena focused harder, scribbling out matrix transformations with brutal speed. Her hand moved fast, her mind faster. She felt it rising. The pressure, the old itch of being watched, doubted, dissected. She had felt it during her first AP Calc exam. She had felt it during the district finals, when a teacher had asked her to show her work twice. She had felt it when her science fair partner got the praise, and she got the side-eye. But this was louder, bolder. 30 minutes in, Lena had answered all but the final 2 questions, both long-form proofs designed to separate the prodigies from the prepared. She paused, breathing shallow through her nose, and stared at the problem like a rival. Her brain began dancing with possibilities. She reached into her internal library. Not just formulas, but techniques, tricks, pathways she'd invented herself during long nights alone in her room. This was where she'd shine. And she did. She constructed the proof step by step with the confidence of someone who had no choice but to be right. Logic unfurled like silk. The numbers sang to her, even as the room darkened with doubt. At minute 57, she wrote the final line, drew a confident box around her answer, and set her pencil down. The moment her paper hit the edge of her desk, a shadow fell across it, She looked up. It was the same judge with the red tie. Clipboard still in hand. No expression on his face. "Miss Caldwell," he said quietly, "please remain seated after time is called." Lena's stomach tightened. Why? His face didn't change. Further review. Before she could respond, the intercom blared again. Time. All pencils down. Chairs scraped. Students stretched. Exhaled. Whispered. Papers rustled as they were collected row by row. The judge didn't move. He stood over Lena, arms crossed now, watching her as if she'd just tripped an alarm no one else could hear. She kept her face steady, refusing to shrink. The proctor collected her paper without comment. She noticed it was slipped into a red folder, not the stack the others went into. That wasn't protocol. Around her, students filtered out. Some glanced back at her. Some didn't. A few wore smirks. One mouthed something she couldn't make out. Lena's heart thumped, but she kept her back straight. She had done nothing wrong. The last student left. The doors shut with a thud. Now it was just Lena, the judge, and two other officials who had moved silently into the room like vultures. The man in the red tie finally spoke. "We noticed your scoring pattern, and it raised some flags." "What kind of flags?" Lena asked, her voice even. He looked down at his clipboard. "You completed a 30-minute section in under 11 minutes, with no scratch work. You finished the advanced proof sequence faster than any contestant in history. You used a solution method not listed in the official guide." "Because it was my method." He raised an eyebrow. "Interesting." One of the other judges stepped forward. A woman in her 40s with a tight bun. "We're asking you to remain available for academic integrity evaluation. Until then, your score is being withheld." Lena blinked slowly. "You're accusing me of cheating." "We're reviewing unusual activity. That's all," the man said, lips flat. Lena stood up slowly. "You didn't say that to anyone else." The woman didn't answer. Her stomach twisted, not with guilt, but with the rage of being treated like a suspect instead of a scholar. She thought of her mother, of the scholarships that depended on this win, of the weekends she spent solving Olympiad problems while others went to homecoming. They weren't just doubting her. They were erasing her, and they were about to make it official. The door behind her creaked open again, and a second judge she hadn't seen all day walked in carrying a sealed envelope and a single printed sheet. Lena's test answers, flagged statistically anomalous. The sealed envelope landed on the long table with an unnerving thump. Inside, Lena's test, printed and highlighted, with a bold red header across the top. "Anomalous score pending verification." Lena sat across from the panel now, a makeshift tribunal, assembled in one of the school's back conference rooms. Fluorescent lights buzzed above. No windows, no clock, just the hum of quiet suspicion, and the cold click of a digital recorder turning on. She looked at the faces around her. The man in the red tie, now introduced as Mr. Dalton Crane, head judge. The tight-bunned woman who had escorted her here, Miss Riley, a board representative. And a third figure who hadn't spoken yet, a younger man in a slate gray suit, fingers folded neatly like this was just another routine policy review. But nothing about this felt routine. "Miss Caldwell," Crane began, voice smooth as glass. "Do you understand why you're here?" Lena nodded slowly. "Because I scored too high," he chuckled. "Just barely. That's one way to phrase it." He slid the paper forward, tapping at the data summary. "According to our software's scoring model, your answer progression doesn't align with normal test-taking behavior. For instance, you completed sections 2 and 3 faster than any contestant we've ever tracked. Your error rate was 0. You used non-standard solving techniques." "Because I invented some of them," Lena interrupted, trying to stay composed. Crane didn't flinch. "You're 16, Miss Caldwell, a junior. This competition includes seniors who've placed nationally. Some are on track to MIT and Stanford. Your performance not only exceeded theirs, it statistically outpaced the norm curve for our most advanced adult competitors." Lena stared at him. "So you think I cheated because I'm too smart?" Miss Riley spoke now. "It's not about intelligence, it's about integrity. The testing system exists to ensure fairness. When a score is flagged as anomalous, we must verify the legitimacy." Lena leaned forward, her voice low. "Did you flag anyone else?" The room went still. Mr. Crane adjusted his tie. "You were the only contestant whose score fell outside the projected percentile range, based on pre-qualification assessments." "You mean based on who I am, where I'm from, what I look like?" "Now let's not make this personal," Miss Riley cut in, her tone rehearsed. "This is a procedural matter. But Lena saw it now, the way the words danced around truth. Anomalous, suspicious, irregular. They weren't talking about numbers. They were talking about her. Dalton Crane folded his hands. Let me be candid. In the 43-year history of this contest, no black student has ever ranked first. That fact alone raises questions. There it was. The air left the room for a moment. Lena sat frozen, her eyes locked on the edge of the table, jaw tight enough to crack teeth. I can walk you through my solution methods, she said quietly. Line by line. I can replicate everything without a calculator. I don't need to cheat. Crane smiled. A polite, managerial smile. That's exactly what we intend to verify. He slid another folder forward, this one with a printed chart. On it, the expected score curve, color-coded. Lena's dot floated off the top, far removed from the cluster. Her anomaly was visual now. A disruption to their pattern. A threat to the expected story. Ms. Riley leaned in. Statistically speaking, your performance is a 6 sigma outlier, less than 1 in a million probability. Lena blinked. So you're telling me I should have underperformed, just to be believable? They didn't answer. The silence became its own verdict. From the corner of the room, the third man, the one in the gray suit, finally spoke. I've reviewed the exam footage, he said flatly. There's no direct evidence of misconduct, no visible devices, no eye movement indicating copying. But, Lena raised an eyebrow. But the algorithm detected pacing patterns, inconsistent with standard test behavior. No erasures, no second guessing, almost robotic. I was prepared, she said. He looked up, his expression neutral. You were perfect. Lena stared back. Is that a crime now? Dalton Crane leaned forward again, fingers steepled. Let me offer a path forward. We're not accusing you of intentional fraud yet, but until we complete an integrity audit, we're placing your test result under hold. What does that mean? It means, he said calmly, you are not being awarded a ranking. You are not advancing to nationals. And your score is being withheld from scholarship committees until we resolve the discrepancy. Lena's breath caught in her throat. You're freezing me out. We're protecting the credibility of the competition. And what about my credibility? Her voice rose. Not a scream, but a sharpened edge. What about the hours I studied? The practice tests? The nights I stayed up with a flashlight because our power got cut again? I earned this. Crane shrugged slightly. We don't make these decisions lightly. But there are standards. She saw it now. The politeness was the mask. The standards were the weapon. And the system? It was working. Exactly. As designed. Lena stood, chair scraping against the linoleum. So, what happens next? Crane folded his hands again. We'll notify your school. There will be a follow-up interview, possibly a retest under proctored conditions. In the meantime, your paper is being submitted to the National Academic Integrity Board. Ms. Riley added, you may want to consider seeking legal counsel. This could affect your academic record if formal charges are filed. Lena blinked, stunned. Charges? Academic fraud is a serious accusation, Riley said calmly. We hope it doesn't come to that. The third man turned off the recorder. That'll be all for today. Lena's legs moved before her mind. She left the room with the paper still sitting on the table, the paper she had poured everything into, the paper they now treated like a threat. The hallway was empty. The contest was over. Outside, a few students were gathered near the shuttle buses. Some were laughing. A few glanced her way. One girl she recognized from the earlier whispering took a photo as Lena walked by. She reached for her phone instinctively and saw the notification. Math fraud trending in region. Who cheats on a math contest? How'd she even get in? Lena's fingers trembled. She hadn't said a word to anyone. But the story, their version, was already out. They hadn't just frozen her score. They were erasing her name. She looked around. The air was cold now. Not in temperature. In truth, there was no safety here. Not in rules. Not in performance. Not in logic.
They had decided what was statistically impossible. Not based on math but on memory. On prejudice. On a history she hadn't written but was now buried under.
She reached the curb where a rideshare waited. Her mother's idea in case things ran late. As she climbed in, her phone buzzed again. A new email. From State Mathematics Committee. Subject: immediate score withhold an academic inquiry notification. And beneath it, a PDF attachment titled Placement Status Under Investigation. As Lena opened the document, she saw something she hadn't expected. Her name had been completely removed from the placement roster. Not flat, Not pending. Just gone. The PDF blurred on Lena's phone screen as she sat motionless in the back seat of the rideshare. Her name wasn't marked pending or flagged. It had vanished entirely, like she'd never competed, like she'd never existed in that room. There was no footnote, no explanation, just a clean revised placement list, 49 names. Hers wasn't among them. She felt her throat tighten, but not from surprise, from the familiar weight of erasure. The way systems didn't break, they worked exactly as they were meant to. Quietly, thoroughly, without leaving fingerprints. As the car rolled past the stadium, Lena's eyes drifted toward the cluster of students still lingering outside. Some were laughing, others were scrolling their phones, thumbs moving fast. But as her car slowed at a light, one boy pointed at the vehicle, another lifted his phone. She looked away. By the time she reached home, the algorithm had moved faster than rumor ever could. Online, a clip was already circulating, blurry, shaky, but damning. It showed Lena being pulled aside by officials after the exam. No sound, just her looking up, confused, as a judge motioned toward the exit.
No context, just a caption.
Cheater caught red-handed at state math championship. And below it, the hashtag, math fraud. The comments were worse. Of course she cheated. Affirmative action flunked again. She probably had answers in her hair.
LeMail Dunbar magnet. Never heard of it.
Lena stared at the screen, not blinking. Her ears were ringing. Her hands were cold. She refreshed the page. The clip had already passed 10,000 views. Someone had slowed it down, zoomed in on her face, added dramatic music. Another version had circled the moment she was handed the red folder, implying guilt. The internet wasn't asking what happened. It had already decided. Her mother, Denitra, walked in, still wearing her Navy Public Library badge and carrying a takeout bag. But as soon as she saw Lena's face, she dropped it. What happened? Lena didn't speak. She just handed over the phone. Denitra read in silence for several minutes. Her lips parted slightly. She scrolled through the comments, her jaw clenching tighter with each swipe. She moved to say something, then didn't. She set the phone down carefully. They're saying you cheated? I didn't. I know that, Denitra said. You know that. But these people. She couldn't finish the sentence. Lena sat down on the edge of the couch, her voice barely above a whisper. They erased me, like I was never there. Denitra's voice cracked. After everything you worked for, the late nights, the old textbooks, I couldn't even afford that prep course. I didn't need it, Lena said, sharper than she meant to. Her mother softened. I know, baby. But nothing softened the ache in Lena's chest. The test had been her shot, her way out. A win here could have triggered scholarships, national rankings, recommendation letters. Instead, she had become a punchline, a meme. Somewhere, at a prep school, with marble floors, a student who hadn't scored half her points was probably celebrating right now. He wouldn't be investigated. He wouldn't trend. He'd just be considered brilliant by default. Lena opened her laptop. She typed her name into the search bar. The results stung. A math blog had already posted a speculative entry. Unusual patterns in state championship. Concerns over score tampering. The article used words like alarming, discrepant, and unverified report, but it included a screenshot of Lena's test number, pulled from a leaked scoreboard image. They blurred her name, but not enough. Below the article, another wave of comments. Math isn't a diversity contest. She probably memorized the answers. Why are they even letting inner-city kids in? Lena closed the tab. The next morning, her school was a minefield. Dunbar Magnet prided itself on producing urban achievers. But when Lena walked into the hallway, no one looked at her the same. Whispers trailed her like shadows. Someone murmured, "Cheater," just loud enough as she passed. A group of students stared at her backpack like it contained contraband. Even teachers hesitated. Her calculus instructor offered a half smile, tight and confused, then looked away. In the cafeteria, a girl from her chemistry class approached her with forced concern. I just wanted to say I don't believe them, but like, why wouldn't they let you keep your score? Lena didn't answer. The girl lingered awkwardly, then left. That question, why, hung in the air, like smoke. Why wouldn't they believe her? Why wouldn't they let her prove herself? Why was brilliance only ever believable when it looked a certain way? That afternoon she received another message, this time from a local education journalist. The email was polite, but the subject line made Lena recoil. Student at Center of Math Scandal declines interview. She hadn't declined anything. She'd never been asked. They were already building the story without her. As evening fell, Denitra sat on the porch with a folder in her lap. Lena's practice scores, old competition papers, recommendation letters, proof, but no one had asked for it. "I'm calling the board," she said. "Tomorrow. They won't care. They have to." Lena didn't answer. She looked up at the stars instead, too distant to reach, too quiet to answer. She knew what would come next. A few days of speculation, maybe a longer article, then silence. The kind of silence that buried futures. But something shifted the next day. As she walked into school, the front office was crowded, not with students, with reporters, microphones, cameras. Someone had tipped them off. Questions flew at her like darts. "Lena, do you deny the accusations? Are you planning legal action? Were you coached by someone who gave you the answers?" She froze. And someone snapped a photo. The exact moment her eyes flicked away, overwhelmed. That image would become the one that circulated the widest. Caption: contestant at center of math cheating scandal, refuses to answer. Later that afternoon, her counselor summoned her into the office, not to offer support, but to advise her on damage control. "We're not taking sides, Lena," the counselor said, voice careful. "But we recommend staying off social media. Let it die down. I didn't do anything wrong. I understand, but public perception is racist," Lena snapped. The counselor hesitated, blinking. "Maybe," she said softly, "but that's not something we can fix right now." Back in class, a boy leaned over and whispered, "Hey, can I get your test answers too?" Another one added, "Only if you got a code in your braids." Lena said nothing. She had mastered equations no one in that room could touch, but now, she couldn't even control the narrative around her own name.
That evening, the clip of her being escorted out reappeared, this time with a new caption.
"Girl caught cheating. Blames racism. Math fraud. Play the victim." Lena stared at the video. In it, her face was frozen at the exact moment. Confusion turned into humiliation. Someone had slowed the footage again, this time with exaggerated sound effects. An ominous beat, a text overlay that said, "Busted." The views were climbing. So were the shares. So were the likes. And in the comments, a new wave of venom. "She probably stole the test. Always the victim. You don't belong here." Lena closed the app. For the first time, her hands were shaking. She had fought to prove her brilliance, not just once, but every day in a world that demanded she justify her place in the room. And the second she rose above expectations, the world snapped back to remind her, "You are not allowed to win like this." But the next message on her screen stopped her cold. An anonymous Instagram account had tagged her in a post, a screenshot of her test score, next to her name, followed by the words, "Sources say this has happened before," and been buried. Beneath the post was a DM, short, chilling, and signed only with initials. "You're not the first, Lena. Wanna talk?" Lena Caldwell stood at the bus stop in her navy cardigan, arms folded tightly over a manila folder bursting with documentation. Behind her, the library doors hadn't yet opened for the day, but her shift would have to wait. This wasn't about books. This was about blood. Inside that folder were 10 years of paper trails. Lena's math competition scores dating back to the 4th grade. Old certificates from citywide STEM fairs. Screenshots of Khan Academy leaderboards where Lena had ranked nationally. Even a printed-out graph Denitra made at 2 a.m. comparing Lena's academic growth to national averages. The data wasn't just compelling, it was irrefutable. But Denitra had lived long enough to know that evidence alone didn't bend systems, especially not for girls who looked like hers. By 9 a.m., she stood in front of the State Mathematics Committee building, gray stone glass facade, and a bronze plaque declaring fairness through excellence. The hypocrisy nearly made her laugh. Inside, she was greeted by a receptionist with clipped politeness. Denitra introduced herself and asked to speak with someone on the integrity board. She was told no one was available without an appointment. "I'm not here to book a brunch," Denitra replied coolly. "I'm here to challenge a decision that's affecting my daughter's academic future." Still, she was asked to sit. She waited 37 minutes. Not because she had time, but because she knew that walking away meant surrendering to the machine that was already swallowing her child. Finally, a representative emerged. Mrs. Carol Fincher, head of public relations, gray skirt suit, thin smile, and eyes that had clearly mastered the art of not seeing. They were escorted into a small meeting room. Denitra opened the folder and laid its contents on the table with measured precision. My daughter didn't cheat, she began, voice even. This isn't a defense. This is a presentation of fact. Mrs. Fincher kept her smile. We appreciate your passion as a parent, but we want to assure you this process is impartial. I'm not interested in assurance. I'm interested in Lena's name being restored to the placement list. Immediately. The woman blinked slowly. That's not something PR can authorize. Then get me someone who can. Fincher adjusted her tone. We understand this situation is difficult, but the scoring irregularities. There were no irregularities. Denitra snapped. Her scratch paper matches her final answers. Her pacing was fast because she practiced for months. Her techniques were unorthodox because I taught her to think beyond rote. Memorization. She beat your expectations, not your rules. A flicker of something, maybe surprise, crossed Fincher's face. Denitra leaned in, voice low. Do you know I was a math major at Howard? Full ride. Top of my class. Then I got pregnant, took a job at the library, raised Lena on a single income. I taught her Fibonacci sequences with sidewalk chalk when she was 6. I bought her secondhand textbooks from the 1990s, because I couldn't afford new ones. So before you let your committee erase her, I need you to understand, she earned every digit of that score. There was silence. Then Fincher said carefully, I'll forward your request to the Integrity Board, but they're currently conducting a closed review. I want the test returned, the original, not a redacted PDF. I want the video footage, the algorithm data, and the names of everyone who made the decision to remove her. Fincher stiffened. That may require a legal subpoena. Denitra's expression didn't change. Then get your legal department ready. She gathered her papers and stood. But before she left, she added, Tell Mr. Crane this isn't over. Fincher didn't respond. Outside, Denitra felt the heat of frustration rising through her chest. But she wouldn't cry. Not here, not while they still had power to twist the narrative. She walked straight to her car, pulled out her phone, and began emailing every board contact she could find online, asking for transparency, for records, for accountability. She copied the local school board, the district superintendent, and 3 education reporters she had Googled the night before. She wouldn't let them rewrite her daughter into a statistic. Back home, Lena sat quietly at the kitchen table, scrolling. The viral clip had now reached 75,000 views. Her face was everywhere. Always frozen, always out of context. Her DMs were flooded with slurs, jokes, accusations. Her inbox pinged with silence from scholarship programs. When Denitra walked in, she paused. They won't give me the footage, Denitra said. Not without a subpoena. Lena didn't look up. They won't return the test either. They're citing chain of custody protocols. Still no reaction. Denitra pulled up a chair. They know you're innocent, she said. They just don't want to admit their system failed. Or worse, that it's working the way they designed it. Lena exhaled slowly. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Lena turned now, eyes glassy. But it won't change anything. They already took my name off the list. They already told the world I cheated. They don't need proof. They never did. Denitra reached across the table, rested her hand gently on her daughter's. I'm going to fight this, she whispered. If you can't stand up right now, I will. Lena didn't answer, but she didn't pull her hand away. That night, Denitra opened an old trunk in her closet, the one she hadn't touched in years. Inside were her college notebooks, yellowed and covered in equations. A piece of her life paused but never erased. She began drafting a formal appeal citing educational statutes, bias in algorithmic scoring, and procedural breaches. She didn't have a lawyer yet, but she had clarity. She wasn't just doing this for Lena. She was doing it for every child who had ever been told you don't belong here. 2 days later, while scanning LinkedIn for anyone connected to the state board, Denitra stumbled on something unexpected. A comment on a regional education group page, a name she recognized. Dalton Crane, the head judge. He had recently been tagged in a private post. Proud to lead our confidential policy meeting today. Restoring trust in our competitions begins with integrity and difficult decisions. There were only 2 likes. One from another committee member. Denitra's stomach turned. She clicked deeper, finding an event listing titled, Special Board Session Closed to Public. Date, tomorrow. Location, undisclosed. She searched for more. The calendar didn't appear anywhere on the official website. No mention of Lena's case. Nothing open to parents or press. She reached out to a board administrator she'd spoken to before. After some hesitation, the woman on the phone confirmed what Denitra feared. The committee was holding a special session to discuss policy revisions on academic integrity enforcement. Denitra asked plainly, "Is Lena's case on the agenda?" The administrator paused. "I can't comment on that." Denitra pressed. "Are they considering banning her from future contests?" Another pause. This time longer. Then came the reply, soft, reluctant but clear. "I think you should be prepared for that possibility." Denitra stood in her living room, heart pounding. They weren't just silencing Lena now. They were trying to erase her forever. As Denitra hung up, her email pinged, an anonymous message with a single line. "They've done this before. I have proof. Don't let them do it again." Denitra stared at the anonymous email for a full minute before breathing. The message was simple, just one line, but it thundered in her chest like a gavel. "They've done this before. I have proof. Don't let them do it again." No name, no contact info, just a whisper in the dark. But to Denitra, it felt like confirmation, not just of corruption, but of a pattern. Lena wasn't the first. She'd just been the one who wouldn't stay quiet. She hit reply, fingers trembling, typing cautiously. "Who are you? How do you know?" But no response came. The following morning, Denitra walked Lena to school. Not because Lena needed her to, but because Denitra needed to look into the eyes of the people pretending not to see. She needed to confront the silence they called policy. At 8:17 a.m., she stood in the front office of Dunbar Magnet High School. Fluorescent lights flickered above faded posters about growth mindset and college readiness. Beneath them, a counselor named Mr. Kellen Rhodes sat behind a desk, his expression carefully neutral. He was Lena's AP Calculus instructor. Young, white, Ivy League educated, and always polished in a way that suggested he had never really known failure. He had often praised Lena's intellect in private emails, commended her logic in red pen across assignments. But since the controversy began, he hadn't said a word publicly. Denitra sat across from him, placing a folder on the desk between them. "I need a formal letter of support," she said. "You've seen Lena's work. You know she's capable of that score." Rhodes shifted in his seat. "I don't think I'm the right person to." "You're exactly the right person." Denitra cut in. "You assigned her projects the other students couldn't even start. You called her a gifted theorist in your last progress report. Now they're trying to erase her. And you're silent." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Look, Mrs. Caldwell, this situation is already sensitive. The school's been contacted by media outlets. The district's watching how we respond. I'm being advised to stay neutral until there's a resolution." "A resolution?" Denitra scoffed. "They've already removed her. They've already branded her. What resolution are you waiting for? Her future to be completely destroyed." Rhodes looked away. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "but going on record could damage my credibility. I've worked hard to build this program. I can't jeopardize it based on a case that's still under review." Denitra stood, voice cold now. "You are more worried about your reputation than her future." "She's a remarkable student," he said, almost whispering. "But that doesn't mean people will listen to me." Denitra's mouth tightened. "If you won't fight for her, don't pretend to support her." She walked out without another word. Later that afternoon, Lena sat outside the principal's office, her backpack clutched to her chest. She'd been pulled from English class with no explanation. The secretary avoided eye contact. When Principal Everett finally called her in, his expression was forced sympathy, like someone preparing to deliver a speech he didn't write. "Lena," he began, "we're concerned about the toll this situation is taking on your well-being. There's been a lot of media attention, and we feel it might be in your best interest to step back for a bit." "Step back from what?" Lena asked. "From the contest. From the interviews. From public attention. Just for a little while. Focus on school. Let the process run its course." Lena stared at him. "So you want me to disappear?" He raised his palms. "No one's saying that. But you're not defending me either." Everett hesitated. "We're walking a fine line, Lena. We don't want to escalate things." She looked him dead in the eye. "They already erased me. What's left to escalate?" Everett shifted in his chair. "I'm advising you to let it go. Take the loss. Move on." The words hit like a slap. Lena stood slowly. That's easy to say when you're not the one being erased. Back at home, she tossed her backpack into the corner of her room and collapsed onto the bed. Her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message, this one with an attachment. Subject: how they flag you. Attachment: flagging algo redline. Lena hesitated, then opened it. The document looked internal, maybe leaked from someone inside the committee. A breakdown of the scoring algorithm used to flag statistical anomalies. It included categories like time per question, deviation from cohort average, predictive performance mismatch, unregistered solving methods. Lena's name wasn't listed, but in the footnotes was something chilling. In testing since 2018, algorithm has flagged 92% of cases involving students from underrepresented minority schools. Further review recommended but not implemented. Her breath caught. They hadn't just doubted her because she was fast or brilliant or different. They had built a system that coded her excellence as a threat. She sprinted downstairs, laptop in hand, nearly crashing into Denitra in the kitchen. They're using an algorithm, Lena said, eyes wide. It's not just judgment, it's systemic. The system is designed to flag people like me. Denitra read the document, her face hardening with every line. We need to go public, she said. All of this. The silence, the bias, the data. Lena hesitated. What if it makes things worse? They've already taken everything they can. Now we make noise. Denitra grabbed her phone and opened her contacts. I know someone, she said. He used to work on equity audits for school districts. He might know how to trace the origin of this algorithm. Maybe even who wrote it. Won't they shut us down? Lena asked. Maybe, Denitra said. But we don't let them shut us up. An hour later, they were in a Zoom call with Dr. Evan Jules, a former data scientist turned educational equity consultant. He read through the PDF carefully, adjusting his glasses. I've seen this before, he said. Not the same language, but the same logic. These tools are usually built by private firms. The state contracts them out, and there's no oversight, no bias audit, just raw data fed into code that replicates every prejudice it's trained on. Lena asked quietly, Can we prove it? Dr. Jules nodded slowly. Not from this file alone, but if you can get a copy of the training data, or find someone who worked on the scoring software, we might. Lena sat back, adrenaline humming through her limbs. It wasn't just a contest anymore. It was a pattern. A machine. A system that dressed up discrimination in spreadsheets and percentages. And it had a name. As Dr. Jules clicked to the final page of the leaked file, he paused, eyes narrowing. Wait, this algorithm, it was licensed from a private contractor. And guess who signed the approval? He turned the screen. Lena saw the name and felt her stomach drop. Dalton Crane. Lena sat in the corner of the school library, her laptop open but untouched. The screen displayed an Excel sheet sent by the state contest board, a detailed breakdown of her academic record, course by course, test by test, every decimal of her GPA, every time-stamped homework submission, every standardized test she'd taken since freshman year was there. It wasn't a review, it was a forensic audit. The message attached was brief. To ensure score integrity, we require complete academic alignment. Please provide verification for discrepancies in grading pace and concept mastery versus performance on state examination. Discrepancy. Lena had ranked top of her class since 8th grade. Her records weren't unclear, they were uncomfortable, because they didn't align with what people like Mr. Dalton Crane expected of a black girl from a magnet school with peeling paint and outdated textbooks. She scrolled further. They had even contacted her sophomore geometry teacher for comment. That man had barely remembered her name during parent-teacher night. And yet, nobody had reviewed the test proctor. The boy assigned to her row during the state championship. Austin Blake, a senior from an elite private academy with connections to the board. Lena remembered him vaguely, mostly from the way he kept glancing sideways during the contest and the sharp tension in his body when her hand went up first. He had been fidgety, out of sync, uncomfortable. Yet no one questioned him. Not even after rumors emerged, 2 days later, that he'd slipped an answer sheet to one of his friends. An incident quietly reported to a teacher, then buried. Lena only learned about it from Sarah Malik, a Pakistani-American senior from a neighboring school, who had overheard 2 officials whispering after the contest. Sarah had messaged Lena privately. They're looking into you because it's easier. Austin's dad sits on the sponsor board. If they expose him, they expose the system. You're a scapegoat. The truth felt like a bruise. Lena hadn't noticed until someone pressed it. While Lena's perfect scores and advanced placement credits were combed for anomalies, Austin Blake's name never even appeared in the flagged reports. No calls to his school, no audit of his record, no questions about his methods. Because cheating wasn't about what you did. It was about what they expected you could do. Denitra watched her daughter drown in silence and decided enough was enough. She emailed the board again, CCing journalists and advocacy groups this time. Her message was direct. While you're auditing my daughter's schoolwork from 3 years ago, are you investigating the proctor who was reported for leaking answers? Or do your standards only apply to students from zip codes like ours? Still, no response. But something else cracked. 2 days later, Lena received a ping from an anonymous account using the initials CM. The profile had no photo, no bio, but it sent one file, a screenshot. The image showed a private Discord server titled Quizmaster's Circle, Admin Only, and beneath that, a chat thread labeled Jokes Only Not Politics. In the thread were half a dozen usernames, some clearly recognizable, initials matching contest officials, event planners, and even scoring analysts. One post stood out. Nothing like another affirmative action genius to shake the leaderboard. Below that, someone else replied, should have made her show her work in crayons. A third chimed in, the only numbers she should be counting are lottery tickets. Lena froze. Her name wasn't mentioned directly, but the thread was dated the same day her score had been flagged. The racism wasn't coded anymore. It was casual, mocking, institutional and intimate all at once. She printed the screenshot, fingers shaking. Downstairs, Denitra was pacing. She hadn't slept in 36 hours, operating off cold coffee and adrenaline. When Lena handed her the printout, Denitra's face shifted, not to rage, but something cold. Resolve. They're not just trying to erase you, she said. They're laughing while they do it. She picked up the phone and called Dr. Jules again. We have something new, she told him. Something they can't pretend doesn't exist. That night, they sat together and compiled everything. The algorithm report, the academic audit, Sarah's message, and now the Discord leak. A dossier, a digital rebellion. Dr. Jules connected them to a civil rights attorney named Sasha DeWitt, who specialized in educational discrimination cases. Sasha read the documents silently during the Zoom call, expression unmoving, then said, they built an infrastructure of bias, and you've caught them at the root. Lena asked, can we prove it in court? Sasha paused. Not yet. But we can make them afraid of court. And that's when change starts. Meanwhile, the media silence was cracking. Local bloggers had picked up Lena's story. A student-run newspaper from another district published an op-ed titled, Excellence in Black, When Systems Punish What They Claim to Reward. The comments were divided, some angry, some awakening, but the tide was shifting. Still, the board stayed silent. No official response.
No apology.
But the pressure was building. That Sunday evening, as Lena refreshed her email, a new message arrived from the same anonymous Discord source. This time, the subject line was chilling. You're not ready for how deep this goes. Attached were 3 more screenshots. This time, they weren't from the Discord. They were internal board emails. And one line stood out. A message from Dalton Crane to another official dated a week before the contest. We need to avoid another incident, like last year. Double-check all minority outliers in final scoring. Quietly, no need to trigger a mess. Lena stared at the email, breath shallow. Not only had this happened before, it had been premeditated, and her name was the next one on a list they never thought she'd see. Denitra sat cross-legged on the living room floor, her laptop surrounded by color-coded folders, old contest pamphlets, and a half-eaten plate of toast she'd forgotten about 3 hours ago. The room smelled faintly of cold coffee and determination. Lena, upstairs, was asleep for the first time in 2 days. But Denitra had miles to go. After seeing that email, Dalton Crane's warning to double-check all minority outliers, something inside her snapped from pressure into purpose. This wasn't just Lena's fight anymore. This was a pattern, a blueprint, and Denitra knew how to follow trails. She opened a spreadsheet and began creating a timeline, starting with Lena's case. Then she searched for any articles, blog posts, or public school reports involving academic fraud accusations from the last 10 years. She filtered by keywords: black student, cheating, score flagged, test voided, contest revoked. Within an hour, the pattern was impossible to ignore. A black girl in Michigan, disqualified from a chemistry competition for using unauthorized methods. despite presenting her own lab-developed procedure. A Haitian-American student in Georgia, accused of external help after scoring highest in a national history bowl. His family wasn't even allowed to appeal. A Nigerian immigrant in Texas, disqualified from an SAT prep camp scholarship after an anonymous tip claimed his essay was too advanced to be original. Case after case. School after school. State after state. Different names. Same story. Denitra dug deeper. In many cases there had been no public media coverage, only whispers. Most families didn't fight. Some couldn't afford to. Others were intimidated into silence. Schools often offered quiet re-enrollment, GPA corrections, or alternative placements as solutions, and always the same language echoed. Statistical anomaly. Irregular scoring behavior. Unusual answer progression. The problem wasn't bad policy. It was a belief. A belief that brilliance belonged to some more than others, and that when someone like Lena disrupted that belief, the system would bend to restore the illusion. Denitra leaned back, rubbing her eyes, mind spinning. She needed proof. More than scattered headlines and anonymous tips. She needed someone who had lived through this and come out the other side. She posted in every forum she could find: Reddit threads, Facebook parenting groups, alumni pages, education equity boards. Her message was short, direct, and heavy. Has your black child been accused of cheating in a gifted or competitive academic setting? No matter how long ago, please message me. You're not alone. She refreshed every 10 minutes. Nothing. Until finally, at 2:36 a.m., a message landed in her inbox from a name she didn't recognize. Subject: You're right. It happened to me. From Quentin Reese. The email was long, emotional, and explosive. Quentin Reese had been a state math champion in Illinois 5 years ago, the first black student in his district to ever reach the finals. He had scored first place in the preliminary round, only to be accused of using pre-prepared solutions during the final, disqualified just days before nationals. His school had backed down after his mother threatened legal action, but the damage was done. He never competed again. He was offered a quiet, honorable mention as a consolation. He'd been. Now 22, Quentin was studying applied math at a state university, and had never spoken about it publicly. But Denitra's post had stirred something. Attached to his email were screenshots, messages exchanged between judges during his review, leaked by a friend on the event staff. In one, a judge had typed, "Even if he's that smart, we can't let it look like favoritism. He came out of nowhere." Another said, "We'll let him keep his GPA. Just not the trophy." Denitra felt her chest tighten. It was the same playbook. Different year. Different kid. She replied instantly. Within hours they were on a call. Quentin's voice was calm, but bitter. "I was told I was too advanced for my profile." "Whatever that means," Denitra asked quietly. "Why didn't you go public?" "I was a kid. They made me think I was lucky to be invited in the first place. Like I shouldn't ruin it by complaining. But they robbed you." He exhaled. "They told me I was the exception, and then punished me for proving them right." Quentin agreed to go on record, but only if Lena wanted it. She deserves to know she's not crazy. That she didn't imagine this. Denitra promised she'd ask. Later that morning, Lena sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the edge of her mug. She hadn't said much since the night they discovered the Discord messages. But when Denitra told her about Quentin, and what had happened, something flickered behind her eyes. A mix of relief, validation, and rage. "They've been doing this for years," Lena said, "and no one stopped them. Because they pick people they think won't fight back." Lena looked up, voice firm. "Then let's fight." They video called Quentin that afternoon. He smiled when he saw Lena. "You're smarter than I ever was," he said. "They're scared because you don't just solve problems, you expose them." They talked for 2 hours. About proof strategies, about math camps, about the things no one taught you, like how to survive being told your excellence is impossible. By the end of the call, Lena had an idea. "What if we find others?" she asked. "People like us. We build a case together. They can ignore one voice, maybe even 2. But what if it's 10 or 50? Denitra nodded. "It becomes undeniable." That night, they launched a private group thread. STEM erased. Quentin invited a few former competitors he knew. Lena shared the thread on her socials. Dr. Jules helped spread the word through equity circles. Within 48 hours, the group had grown to 11 students, all with eerily similar stories. Most had never met, Many had never spoken about what happened, but in that thread, a community formed, built on bruised brilliance and the refusal to disappear. Each story sharpened the picture. A boy whose science fair prototype had been retested without him and failed because they used the wrong materials. A girl whose essay had been scanned for AI use, then disqualified for sounding too mature. A robotics team from New Jersey, majority Black and Latino, who had been denied nationals for rule infractions. No one else could confirm. It wasn't random, it was ritual. And now Lena was ready to expose it. Just before midnight, another message hit the thread. This one from a new user, who hadn't introduced themselves yet. The message was simple, but electric. I was on the inside. I used to work for the scoring contractor. I have access logs, test edits, and name. The glow of the laptop cast pale light across Lena's face as she scrolled through the group chat, heart pounding. The anonymous insider who just joined the thread had posted no profile picture, no details, just a single line. I can get you the proof they buried. For a long moment, the thread went silent. 11 other students watched in real time, afraid to type, afraid to break whatever fragile channel had just opened. Finally, Lena responded. What kind of proof? The reply came within seconds. Footage. Logs. The data they said didn't exist. Dimitra leaned closer, reading over her daughter's shoulder. They're claiming they can access the archives.
Yeah, Lena whispered.
The testing room footage, the biometric monitoring, everything they said was off limits. Her hands trembled as she typed again. Who are you? This time, the reply took longer. Then, I worked for the vendor that built the monitoring system. But we were told to purge everything after each contest. They didn't. I made a copy. Dimitra and Lena exchanged a glance. What do they want? Dimitra asked quietly. Before Lena could answer, another message appeared. I'll send you one file tonight. But no screenshots, no uploads. If this gets traced, I lose everything. Attached was a heavily encrypted video file labeled Test Room A113 Final Session. Lena clicked. The screen flickered before stabilizing on a wide shot of the math championship testing hall. Rows of students, each at separate desks. The timestamp in the corner confirmed it her session. She leaned forward, breath shallow. That's me. There she was, seed 114. Calm, focused. Head down, pencil moving steadily. The footage sped up, then slowed, then zoomed at key timestamps. Every few minutes her hand moved to the next page, her pencil never pausing long enough to suggest anything unnatural. No phone, no paper slips, no signaling. It was mechanical in its precision, but unmistakably human. Dimitra's throat tightened. They said the footage was erased.
They lied, Lena said. They always lie when the truth doesn't fit the story.
At the 30-minute mark, the footage caught something else. The proctor Austin Blake, walking up the aisle and glancing down at Lena's paper. His hand lingered on the edge of her desk before moving on. It looked casual, innocent, even, but Dimitra's eyes narrowed. Pause it. Lena froze the frame. Zoom in. She did. Austin's hand was half inside his blazer pocket, fingers gripping what looked like a folded sheet of paper. He moved past her and slipped it toward another student 2 rows up. Right there, Dimitra whispered. That's the leak. That's the actual violation. Lena's chest ached, and they never even looked at him. The video ended as the final bell rang, and the judges entered the room. Crane at the front, eyes scanning, stopping at Lena. The file contained more than footage, though. Inside the same folder were 2 additional documents. Biometric Activity Log, A13 by SEV, and Annotation Review Notes DAX-T. Lena opened the log first. It detailed every participant's physical data, keystrokes, eye movement intervals, response times, heart rate variation, from wrist sensors issued that day. She remembered hers. It had pinched her skin slightly. The data told a story the judges had ignored. Her numbers showed consistency. No spikes, no idle gaps, no duplicate motion patterns. Just steady, rhythmic concentration. By contrast, Austin Blake's readings had several irregular peaks, long pauses, elevated heart rate spikes, and a strange gap 15 minutes before the end, coinciding with the timestamp when he'd slipped the paper forward. The evidence was irrefutable. They had accused the wrong person and buried the one who was guilty. Dimitra leaned back, eyes glistening. This could clear you completely. Lena stared at the screen, numb. They had all of this. They just chose not to see it. Denitra looked at the clock. Past midnight now. Send it to Dr. Jules and Sasha. Now. Before they can scrub it again. Lena uploaded the files into their shared encrypted drive and sent a single-line message to the chat. We have it. The truth they tried to bury. Moments later, Sasha replied. This changes everything. By morning, Dr. Jules had begun cross-referencing the biometric logs. His email to Denitra arrived at dawn. The data matches known integrity benchmarks. No indication of assistance. I've already sent a preliminary review to a journalist at the Chronicle. Brace yourself, once this goes public, they'll fight back. But the Chronicle piece never appeared. Instead, that afternoon, Lena received a system alert. Her online student portal was temporarily deactivated, pending verification. Her GPA, class ranking, and competition history were inaccessible. Mom, she called out, voice cracking. They locked my record. Denitra's head snapped up. What? Lena turned the laptop around. They're scrubbing me from every platform. My entire file's gone. Denitra's hands shook. That's retaliation. It's desperation, Lena corrected. They're scared. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the anonymous insider. You weren't supposed to have that footage. They're investigating a breach. Don't use your real accounts. Denitra typed back. Who are you really? No answer. Instead, a new message came through. This time with a phone number in one line. I'll explain in person. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., downtown library. Lower level. No phones. Lena's pulse quickened. Mom, it could be a trap. Denitra thought for a moment, eyes hard. Or it could be the only person brave enough to tell us the truth. That night, Denitra couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like an omen. She sat at the kitchen table, replaying the footage in her mind. The steady pencil, the calm concentration, the proof of her daughter's innocence, and wondering how many other parents never got to see that kind of evidence before it was erased. Upstairs, Lena stared at the ceiling, headphones on but no music playing. She kept picturing Austin Blake's hand sliding the paper forward. The arrogance of someone so sure the system would protect him. At 6:30 the next evening, they drove to the library, neutral ground. The same one where Denitra worked part-time. Its quiet halls now carrying a different kind of weight. The building was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights flickering to life as they entered. Denitra checked the clock. A tall figure in a hooded coat appeared near the stacks. Moving carefully, they hesitated before stepping closer. You're the one who sent the footage? Denitra asked. The person nodded. Their voice was low, measured. I was part of the committee's tech division. We handled the scoring system and the biometric database. Lena leaned forward. Why did you contact us? Because I couldn't stand watching it happen again. They pulled out a flash drive, placing it gently on the table. Everything you saw was real, but it's bigger than your test. The algorithm you were flagged by. It's been used for years. It was built to predict outliers. The problem is, it learned to equate outlier with black. Denitra swallowed. You're saying the algorithm itself is racist? I'm saying it was trained on biased data and no one ever audited it. When we realized what it was doing, I raised concerns. I was told to stop asking questions. Lena frowned. By who? The whistleblower hesitated, eyes darting toward the library door. By Dalton Crane himself. Denitra felt the air leave her chest. He knew. The whistleblower nodded. He approved every override, every manual flag, every deleted file. I made copies of the server logs before leaving. If we release them, it proves intent, systemic bias, not accident. Lena's voice broke. You can end this. Help me clear my name. The whistleblower looked down. You don't understand. If I'm found, I'll lose my career. My family. I'm already being watched. Denitra leaned forward. Then stay anonymous. Let us do the talking. The whistleblower's eyes flickered with fear. There's more. You think this started with your test? It didn't. It started with funding. The algorithm's sponsor is tied to a corporate education network, and Crane is on their payroll. Lena froze. He's profiting off the system that ruined me. Yes. Every time a flagged score is appealed, the board gets paid to retest. They turn bias into business. The room fell silent. The whistleblower stood, glancing at the clock. I'll send the rest tomorrow. But after that, you won't hear from me again. It's too dangerous. They turned to leave, then stopped. Don't trust anyone from the board. Especially not those offering apologies. They walked away, disappearing between the shelves, leaving the flash drive on the table. Denitra reached for it slowly, her hand trembling. Lena stared at the tiny device that now held the weight of everything they'd been fighting for. Truth, corruption, and a man's quiet confession that the system was never broken, only weaponized. As they stepped into the parking lot, Denitra's phone buzzed with a new email. No subject line, just one sentence in bold. "We know you met him." Denitra didn't open the email in the car. Not right away. She and Lena sat in silence. The doors locked, the flash drive between them like a lit match in a room full of gas. Outside, the streetlights buzzed, casting long shadows across the pavement. Inside, only the sound of Lena's breath and the distant hum of a passing train. Finally, Denitra tapped the screen. The message loaded in seconds. "We know you met him." No greeting, no sender, no signature, just those 6 words. Attached was a blurry surveillance photo. It showed Denitra and Lena seated in the library. The image was time-stamped. 7. The whistleblower was mostly obscured, but not enough. Someone had been watching. Someone wanted them to know it. Denitra swallowed hard. "We have to move fast." They didn't go home. They drove straight to Dr. Jules' apartment. He lived in a second-floor walk-up surrounded by bookshelves, whiteboards, and a clutter of coffee mugs. When he opened the door, Lena didn't even wait for a hello. She handed him the flash drive. He plugged it in without a word, eyes scanning the folders. Server logs, source code, internal memos, documentation for the scoring algorithm, used in the state's academic competitions, built and licensed under a project name called Equiscore. "This is it," he said. "This is the engine that runs their bias." Lena stood behind him, arms crossed tightly across her chest. "Can it be traced?" Dr. Jules nodded. "Every data model leaves fingerprints. Let me show you." He pulled up a series of graphs, student performance curves, disaggregated by race, gender, and income level. Then he overlaid them with the Equiscore flag rate. The patterns were immediate, undeniable. Black and Latino students are 5 times more likely to be flagged for statistical anomalies, even when their scores match or exceed their white peers, he said. And here's the real problem. The algorithm wasn't trained on representative data. Lena leaned in. "What does that mean?" "It means," he explained, "the model learned what normal performance looks like, based on white, suburban, upper-middle-class students. Anyone outside that demographic is treated as a deviation, a threat. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as it was built, to protect an idea of genius that doesn't include you." The words hit Lena like ice. "So I was never supposed to win." He clicked deeper into the code logs. "It gets worse." Denitra stepped forward. "How could it get worse than that?" Dr. Jules pulled up one final report. Flag Prescreening Index. This document shows that participants were evaluated before their exams even began. They used zip codes, school ranking, and even surnames to calculate risk profiles. Anyone who triggered a certain threshold was flagged for post-exam review before the test was even scored. Lena stared at the screen, stunned. "You're saying my disqualification was automatic?" "Yes," he said. "The moment you entered your ID number, you were routed into a separate review pipeline. The judges didn't need evidence. The algorithm did the accusing for them." Denitra's jaw clenched. "That's illegal." "It's unethical," Dr. Jules said. "But because it was framed as data-driven quality control, they've been able to avoid lawsuits." Lena felt her throat tighten. "They didn't care what I wrote. My answers didn't matter." He nodded solemnly. "Your paper was already under suspicion before you opened it." The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. Then Dr. Jules turned back to the screen. "But now we have what they never wanted the public to see: proof of intent, proof of bias, and proof of discriminatory design." He looked at Lena. "If we release this, it will shake the state board to its core. But they'll come after you even harder." "I don't care," Lena said quietly. "I want my name back." "And what about the others?" Denitra asked. "How many students have they erased?" Dr. Jules opened another file, a CSV log of all students flagged by the algorithm over the past 4 years. Over 1,000 entries, many of them marked under review. Dozens marked score withheld. Lena scrolled through the names, stopping at one, Quentin Reese. She kept scrolling. There were others she recognized from the group chat. Some she didn't. But the pattern held. Over 90% of flagged names were Black or Latino. Many from low-income schools, all labeled outliers. "This isn't just about me," Lena said. This is a civil rights case. Dr. Jules nodded. Then we need to prepare. They spent the next 3 hours compiling the data into a secure report, redacting sensitive identifiers, backing up files to multiple encrypted drives, and crafting a timeline that connected everything: the algorithm, the flagged names, the suppression of footage, the leaked chats, the anonymous whistleblower. By 3 a.m., they had a working document. Denitra exhaled. Who gets it first? Dr. Jules hesitated. We could leak it anonymously. Or, we go straight to the State Board of Education. Demand a hearing. Lena shook her head. No more backdoor meetings. No more silence. If we're doing this, we do it where everyone can see. Her voice didn't shake. It was calm. Certain. A 16-year-old girl, already forced to become the adult, in a room full of gatekeepers. Dr. Jules looked at her with quiet admiration. Then we go public. But just as he hit send on a contact request to a known education rights journalist, Lena's phone buzzed again. Another message. This one came from a blocked number. You've made your point. Time to stop. There are consequences for disobedience. Denitra stared at the screen. They're threatening us. Dr. Jules read the message, his mouth tightening. They're bluffing. They don't want a public fight. But Lena knew better. They never wanted a fair one, either. The next day, the Chronicle broke the story. Leaked code reveals racial bias in state academic scoring algorithm. Students flagged before tests begin. Within hours, the headline trended nationwide. News anchors debated it on morning shows. Civil rights groups launched investigations. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves. Emails flooded the state board's inbox. A hashtag began to spread. Tested but targeted. The state board released a short statement. We take these allegations seriously and are reviewing all internal processes. But Lena wasn't interested in statements. She wanted accountability. That afternoon, as they prepared for a press call with their attorney, Lena received one more message. This one from the original whistleblower. There's something you still don't know. The system wasn't just built to flag. It was built to replace. Your score wasn't just withheld. It was overwritten. Lena stared at the screen, heart racing, as the whistleblower attached one final document, a side-by-side of her original answers, and the altered version submitted to the public record. The side-by-side comparison stared back at Lena, like a betrayal carved in numbers. Column A. Her original test submission. The one she'd written in her own notations. Her own method. Clean, logical, genius on paper. Column B. The official version submitted to public records. Doctored, sloppy substitutions. 3 answers were changed entirely. Just enough to make her paper appear suspicious. Just enough to justify her removal. They hadn't just erased her. They'd rewritten her. Denitra's fingers trembled as she scrolled. This isn't just bias. This is tampering. Lena said nothing. Her voice was buried under layers of shock, fury, and something even deeper. The realization that brilliance had never been enough to protect her. Her excellence had triggered the system's defense. Later that day, their attorney Sasha confirmed the news. The State Academic Integrity Board was moving forward with a formal review, but it would be held behind closed. No cameras, no press, and no recordings, Sasha warned. They're calling it a confidential remediation session. Lena frowned. They mean cover-up. Denitra agreed instantly. So they can deny whatever they want without consequences. Still, they had no choice but to attend. The board headquarters was a beige building with no name on the door. Inside, everything was quiet, too quiet. The receptionist didn't smile. The security guard didn't speak. Even the waiting room chairs seemed designed to discourage comfort. A man appeared after 10 minutes and said only, "Follow me." He led them down a hallway lined with portraits. All white men, all smiling under bold job titles. At the end of the corridor, a tall mahogany door. The man opened it without knocking. Inside, the conference room was sterile. 6 officials seated around a U-shaped table. Bottled water, identical folders, nameplates. No reporters, no observers. And sitting dead center Dalton Crane. He didn't stand when they entered. Just nodded once. "Miss Caldwell. Mrs. Caldwell. Thank you for coming." Sasha sat on one side of Lena. Denitra on the other. They placed their binders on the table. Data, documentation, biometric logs, side-by-side test records. The truth. Crane opened a hearing. "This is not a trial. This is a closed deliberation. Our goal is resolution, not confrontation." He said it like he was reading from a pamphlet.
Lena said nothing.
The first few minutes were procedural. The board summarized the issue. An unusually high score, flagged performance metrics, discrepancies in answer sequencing. They didn't mention the algorithm, or the doctored answers, or the footage. When it was Lena's turn to speak, her voice was calm but clear. "I didn't cheat," she said. "I studied harder than anyone in that room. My methods are unconventional because I created them. I solved that test fairly." Crane tilted his head. "We understand your position. However, your performance does not align with the predictive data we use to validate scoring outcomes." "You mean the algorithm that penalizes minority students by design?" Sasha interrupted. There was a shift in the room. Subtle discomfort. Another board member, Ms. Laren, interjected. "The algorithm is proprietary. We can't confirm or deny its internal structure." Lena leaned forward. "But you used it to decide my future." Crane folded his hands. "The integrity of the contest is paramount. Exceptions can't be made for unusual cases." Denitra's voice sharpened. "Define unusual." Silence. Then one of the older male board members chuckled softly. "Your kind is very determined. I'll give you that." The air froze. Sasha's jaw clenched. "Can you repeat that for the record?" "There is no official record," Crane said flatly. Lena blinked slowly. "Because you don't want one." Crane continued without reaction. "After review of submitted documents, scoring audits and institutional commentary, the board has drafted a recommendation." He opened a folder. The paper inside was already signed. It read, "Recommendation. Score nullification. Ineligible for re-entry. Fine." Denitra stood. "This hearing is a lie." Sasha added, "You made this decision before we walked in." Crane's face didn't move. This hearing was a courtesy. Denitra reached into her bag, pulled out her phone hidden under a file, and hit stop recording. She'd captured every word since the moment they entered. Lena's eyes met hers. Denitra gave a subtle nod. If they wouldn't give her justice in the room, she'd take it outside. Hours later, they sat in the car in stunned silence. Lena gripped the steering wheel, unmoving. Denitra stared out the window. Sasha was on the phone, already drafting an injunction. They doctored the test. They ran a rigged algorithm. They ignored the whistleblower. And now they've permanently banned a 16-year-old for outperforming their expectations. "They've done it before," Lena said quietly. "They'll do it again." "Not this time," Denitra whispered. That night, Denitra uploaded the recording to a secure drive and sent it to their contact at the Chronicle. She attached the test comparisons, the footage, the logs, and a single message. They said there was no record. "We made one." By morning, the audio was everywhere. A clipped segment went viral. "Your kind is very determined," followed by, "This hearing was a courtesy." People were furious. Civil rights leaders condemned the board. Thousands of parents signed petitions. News anchors replayed the quote on loop. Even politicians who'd stayed silent began to comment. The board issued a rushed statement. The leaked audio was taken out of context. "We are initiating an internal review." But it was too late. Lena's name was trending, not as a cheater, but as a whistleblower, a symbol, a teenager who exposed what decades of students had been afraid to say. Still, nothing was official. The board hadn't reversed its decision. Lena's score was still nullified. Her record still locked. Until another message arrived, this time from someone they never expected. It was from a current board member, and all it said was, "Meet me. Alone. I have something you need to see. Bring the flash drive. Don't tell the lawyer." The flash drive trembled slightly in Lena's hand as she stood in the shadows behind the parking garage of the city courthouse. It was just after 7 p.m. The sky was a chalky gray, heavy with a storm that hadn't decided if it would fall. Lena was alone, as instructed. A car pulled up. Mid-sized. Tinted windows. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. Tall, blonde, board badge still clipped to her coat. Lena recognized her. Miriam Vaughn, junior committee analyst. She'd been quiet during the hearing. Too quiet. "I don't have long," Miriam said, eyes darting nervously. "They're watching everyone now." Lena held up the drive. "You asked for this." "I didn't bring you here for that," Miriam said, her voice dropping. "I brought you here because the verdict was rigged before the contest ever began. Dalton didn't just sign off on the algorithm. He manually approved override protocols, ones that replaced your final score with a template to match the statistical forecast for your zip code." Lena's stomach turned. "He changed my answers." And not just yours, Miriam said. It's bigger than you realize. There are 24 students flagged in the last 3 years who had their original scores replaced with falsified ones. She handed Lena a folder. Inside were names, test codes, notes from internal committee memos, proof of alteration, file edits, and ghost overrides. Lena blinked. Why are you giving this to me? Because you spoke out, Miriam said. And because I should have, a long time ago. She stepped back toward the car, leaving Lena standing there with the folder and a truth too heavy to carry alone. By morning, the second wave of the firestorm had begun. The leaked audio had already gone viral. Now the document drop, quietly passed from Sasha to a national reporter, exploded online. Hashtags doubled, triple, news segments aired side-by-side comparisons of Lena's answers. Twitter boiled over. Tested but targeted. Let Lena retell. Math deserves justice. Celebrities chimed in. Actors, athletes, authors. A STEM foundation started a scholarship in Lena's name, before she even graduated. A famous physicist tweeted, "If Lena Caldwell is who the system rejects, the system is broken. She's more than a student. She's a warning." By noon, the story had hit international headlines. U.S. contestant punished for scoring too high. Racism allegations rock math board. Teen genius erased. Then exposed the truth. Protesters gathered outside the state academic office by afternoon. Students held signs. Lena solved the problem. You just didn't like the answer. Others chanted, "We are not anomalies." Lena watched it all from her living room couch. Phone in one hand, tea in the other, her name flashing across every screen in the country. She wasn't invisible anymore. But she wasn't free, either. Her score was still invalid. Until the call came. Sasha put the phone on speaker, voice tight. That was the board. They've called an emergency meeting. Public this time. Press included. Lena raised an eyebrow. Why the change? They're bleeding credibility, Sasha replied. You made them too loud to silence. And now they're trying to control the fallout. Denitra crossed her arms. What do they want? Sasha hesitated. They want to offer Lena a chance to retake the test. Publicly. Live streamed. Same difficulty. Same format. Lena's eyes narrowed. So now I have to prove I'm not a fraud. Again, just to fix their lie. Sasha nodded grimly. They're betting you'll say no, that you'll be too scared to try, that the pressure will make you fold. Lena stood slowly. Then they've never met a Caldwell woman. The announcement was made that evening. A live press conference. Lena Caldwell had been offered the opportunity to retake the exam in full view of the public, with independent proctors and cameras present. The board spokesperson called it an effort to re-establish trust through transparency. It was a performance. But Lena wasn't afraid of the stage. The public reaction was immediate. Let her cook. She's gonna fry that test and hand it back in flames. Hope the cameras can keep up. Even her fiercest critics were quiet now. The data, the recordings, the racism, it was too much to ignore. Still, not everyone was thrilled. Behind closed doors, Dalton Crane issued no apology, no resignation. He simply disappeared from public view, taking a leave of absence as media closed in. Miriam Vaughn was quietly suspended for her leak. But Lena had made her choice. She would take the test. Not to prove herself, but to prove the system wrong. The night before the exam, Lena sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by flashcards, notebooks, and silence. Not studying, just thinking. Denitra entered quietly, 2 mugs in hand. Couldn't sleep, she said. Neither could I, Lena replied. Denitra sat beside her. Are you nervous? Lena nodded. But not about the math. What then? The world's watching. If I fail even just a little, they'll say they were right. Denitra placed a hand on hers. You're not here to win back their respect. You're here to show the truth. Whatever happens after that, you've already changed everything. Lena stared down at the formula she'd doodled on the table's napkin. Mom?
Yeah?
What if I mess up? You won't. And if I do? Denitra smiled. Then we get back up, like we always have. But this time, the whole world will see why we had to. The next morning, the auditorium was full. Camera crews lined the back wall. Proctors sat at spaced tables. Judges, new judges, watched from a glass-enclosed booth. And in the center of the room, Lena took her seat. She wore the same navy blazer she wore to the first contest. This time, no badge clipped to her chest, just a small silver pin, engraved with one word, proof. The test was distributed. Timers set. Cameras lit. The announcer's voice echoed through the hall. Begin. Lena picked up her pencil and started to write. In the audience, tucked in the back row, Dalton Crane sat in a plain suit and sunglasses. He wasn't listed on the roster. He wasn't supposed to be there. But his eyes never left Lena, and he wasn't watching to learn. He was waiting to strike again. The hum of cameras filled the room like a distant storm, quiet but ever present. 4 angles were trained on Lena, one fixed over her shoulder, another overhead, one capturing her face, and the last focused on her hands. Nothing would be left to interpretation. This time, the world would see it all. Rows of proctors sat motionless, monitoring the digital clock ticking down from 60-0. Behind the glass booth, a panel of third-party judges, flown in from out of state to ensure neutral oversight, watched with hawk-like precision. The only sound was the scratch of Lena's pencil. It had started. She didn't look around, didn't acknowledge the spectators, didn't blink at the lenses. Page 1, probability and set theory. She read the question, processed the logic, and answered it in 11 seconds. Not from memory, but from clarity. This wasn't reflex. This was rhythm. The world wanted a miracle. But Lena knew this wasn't divine. It was discipline. She worked methodically, her expression unreadable. The camera caught it all. The moment she flipped to page 2 without pausing, her eraser barely touching the paper, the focus in her eyes as she diagrammed a rotating cylinder problem with a freehand precision that looked mechanical, each calculation built on the next. There were no hesitations, no erasures, no drawn-out sighs. The only movement came from her left hand tapping lightly on the desk, not out of nerves but pacing. She had trained herself to do that, to keep time like a pianist. 22 minutes in, she reached the hardest section, a pair of multivariable logic proofs, designed to stall even the best students. Her pencil hovered for just a second. Then she dove in. This time she didn't just write solutions. She narrated in her mind. Step by step. If A is true, then B must follow, unless C contradicts, which it won't, because of set D's dependency rule. That unlocks F, which resolves back to the original inverse. 34 minutes. She flipped the final page. There were murmurs in the observation room. The time hadn't even hit the halfway mark, and Lena was already scanning her last answer, not for errors, but for polish. At 39:44, she set her pencil down, her hands folded calmly, not triumphant, not smug, just certain. One of the judges tapped her earpiece. She's done. The lead proctor, a tall black woman named Miss Karen Reed, with 2 decades in academic testing, walked forward slowly. She didn't speak, just collected the paper, sealed it in a clear envelope, and held it up to the camera. Then she said into the mic, "Test complete. No violations. No interventions. Session timestamp logged at 39 minutes, 44 seconds. Lena stood slowly. Her knees didn't shake. The audience, those behind the cameras and those watching from screens, erupted. Twitter surged. News tickers flashed updates. Lena Caldwell completes advanced test in record time. Again, cameras confirm. No cheating. No excuses. Just genius. Even skeptical anchors couldn't find new angles. She worked like a machine, one said. No shortcuts. No signs of pre-programmed recall. Just pure cognitive performance. But as Lena stepped into the hallway, flanked by Sasha and Denitra, a voice called from the press side. Miss Caldwell, what do you say to those who still doubt it wasn't memorized? Lena paused. She turned slowly toward the camera.
I say you watched it happen.
In real time. With the whole world watching. If you still can't believe it, maybe the problem isn't the math. She turned back, jaw set. They returned to the holding room while the test was graded. It was supposed to take 45 minutes. It took 11. The results arrived by courier. Sealed, verified, triple signed. Scores. The observers cheered. The media cameras flashed. Sasha squeezed Lena's shoulder, her smile unshakable. You didn't just win, she whispered. You redefined the win. But just as the official verdict was being prepared for announcement, a figure stepped forward from the scoring review table. Mr. Simon Rokes, a senior official from the National Testing Council, cleared his throat and addressed the room. There's one concern that needs to be addressed before certification, he said, adjusting his glasses. The room quieted. What concern? Sasha asked. Rokes picked up the test packet and held it up. The problem isn't whether the answers are correct, he said. They are. The issue is how she arrived at them. Sasha frowned. She worked them out on paper in real time. You had 4 cameras. What more do you need? Rokes gestured to the test. She didn't use traditional solving methods on multiple questions. She bypassed intermediate steps, jumped directly to advanced formulations, even ones not taught at her school. Lena's voice was calm. Because I taught them to myself. Rokes nodded stiffly. Be that as it may, there is a concern, not of cheating but of prior exposure. Dimitra narrowed her eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying, Rokes said, the committee cannot formally certify this result, unless Miss Caldwell agrees to one more condition. Lena didn't blink. What condition? Rokes folded his arms. You must demonstrate, on command, how you derived each answer, without your paper in front of you, from memory. The silence was instant. Sharp. Dimitra stepped forward. You just watched her perform, in real time. Now you want her to re-perform? Rokes' expression didn't shift. This is an extraordinary case. Extraordinary outcomes require extraordinary verification. Sasha spoke now, anger rising. You didn't ask that of any other student. Not once in 40 years. No other student scored this high in this time frame with non-standard notation. Rokes replied. Lena finally spoke. Let me get this straight, she said slowly. You watched me solve it. You timed it. You recorded it. And now, because I did it too well, you're saying it's not real unless I prove it again. Rokes said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Lena inhaled. Steady. Even. I'll do it, she said. Lena, Dimitra warned. It's fine, Lena said, eyes locked on Rokes. I'll walk through every problem. Right here. Right now. But better that if you still refuse to certify it, then I want your resignation. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Sasha added, and I want that on camera. The cameras, still rolling. Zoomed in. Rokes looked trapped. He nodded. Proceed. As Lena sat down at the chalkboard, ready to walk the world through her mind one step at a time, a courier burst into the room, red envelope in hand, marked urgent, judicial order. It was addressed to the testing committee, and it had just come from federal court. The courier's shoes squeaked on the marble floor as he crossed the testing room. The red envelope clutched like a warning. Every camera panned toward him. He stopped in front of the lead proctor and whispered something inaudible. A hush rippled across the audience as the official slit the seal and unfolded the document. For a long moment, no one breathed. It's a judicial injunction. The proctor announced finally. Federal oversight has ordered the committee to suspend any further questioning until they review procedural fairness. Rokes froze. Sasha's lips parted in disbelief. Dimitra let out a short breath. She didn't realize she'd been holding. Lena just stood still. So that's it? She asked. For now, the proctor said, lowering the letter. You're cleared to present if you wish, but no one can compel you. Lena's eyes flicked toward the cameras, then to the judges behind the glass booth. Good, she said quietly, because I wasn't doing this for them. She stepped forward, toward the whiteboard set up behind her test table. The cameras adjusted focus, catching her profile as she picked up a black marker. The moderator blinked. Miss Caldwell, are you taking a question? Yes, Lena said, scanning the crowd. Random. From anyone. Hands shot up across the auditorium. Journalists, professors, even other contestants from rival schools. She pointed at a woman in the third row, mid-50s, with a notepad filled with scribbled equations. The woman stood. I'm Dr. Hester from the University of Chicago. I have one for you, something we use in our advanced combinatorics course. She read the problem aloud, long and winding. Determine the number of unique integer solutions to the equation x1 4 x2 x3 x4 lead 20, under the condition that each x2 and x1 is even. The crowd murmured. It wasn't a textbook contest question, it was a university-level problem. Complex, multi-layered, unscripted. Perfect. She uncapped the marker. The cameras zoomed in as she wrote the equation cleanly across the board, her handwriting sharp and controlled. First, I'll redefine each variable to make the constraint easier, she said. Let u x2. That transforms the equation into y1. She turned back to the audience, eyes bright.
Now each you zero.
That's a classic stars and bars situation. Her marker moved fast but precise. The total number of non-negative integer solutions is C. 12. She paused, letting it sink in. But remember the constraint, x1 must be even. That means Y1 must also be even. The camera caught her reflection in the board, her eyes alive with energy. For Tomlin Yuvan, she continued, set Y1 E2K, where K BO0. Substitute 2KY. She underlined the new expression, her voice smooth as if she'd rehearsed it in her dreams. Now it becomes another stars and bars. But Kalu wheel 6 because 2K wheel 12. For each K we solve Y2, Y3, Y4. She began tallying cases down the right margin. So total solutions is C from K 0 to 6 of C. 12 2K 3 1. She wrote the summation out, her movements fluid. C 114. C 12 2. C. Compute that, she said, pausing briefly. 91 pull 66 45 20. She capped the marker. The board glowed behind her like proof itself. 252, she said simply. That's the number of valid solutions. Silent. Then thunder. Applause erupted from the back row and swelled forward, the sound crashing like a wave. Even the moderators looked stunned. Dr. Hester, the woman who'd posed the question, stood from her seat, eyes shining. That, she said softly, was correct, and faster than my grad students. Cameras flashed, anchors whispered into microphones. Somewhere in the chaos, a spectator shouted, "That's our genius right there." Lena turned, her face calm, her voice even. "I told you," she said. "It wasn't luck, it was math." In the control booth above, Dalton Crane sat motionless, hands folded tight. The applause below vibrated through the glass, like static. He didn't move, didn't clap, didn't blink. A younger official leaned toward him. "Sir, we have to acknowledge." Crane cut him off. "End the session." "Sir, the cameras are still—" "I said end it." He stood abruptly, pushing back his chair. The official flinched. Crane's face was blank. Not rage, not defeat. Something colder. He exited the booth quietly, ignoring the looks that followed. As he walked down the corridor, the sound of applause faded behind him, replaced by the distant hum of servers. The algorithm's machine still running, still flagging, still humming the rhythm of quiet discrimination he'd helped design. For the first time, the noise felt deafening. Back on the floor, Sasha hugged Lena tightly. "You just dismantled decades of doubt in 40 minutes. Dimitra's eyes glistened, but her voice was strong. "You didn't just prove them wrong. You proved yourself right." The reporters surged forward, microphones out. "How does it feel, Lena? Do you forgive the board? What's next for you?" Lena glanced at the camera nearest her and said, "Next? I want to build systems that don't erase people like me. Maybe then we can stop calling fairness an exception." The crowd roared again. Hours later, after the auditorium emptied, and the headlines filled the nation's feeds, Lena sat outside the building alone. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement. Somewhere behind her, she could still hear the echoes of clapping, fading but unforgotten. She opened her phone, scrolling through hundreds of notifications, messages from strangers, professors, even former critics. One tweet caught her attention. Watching Lena Caldwell felt like watching history fold itself into logic. This is what justice sounds like. She smiled faintly, for the first time without exhaustion behind it. Dimitra appeared beside her, wrapping a coat around her shoulders. "You ready to go home?"
Lena nodded. "Yeah."
They began walking toward the car. The night air was cool, calm, almost merciful. For the first time in months, it didn't feel heavy. Her phone buzzed again. She almost ignored it, until she saw the sender. From admissions as apps MAT. Subject: an invitation to innovate. She stopped walking. Dimitra turned. "What's wrong?" Lena's mouth parted. "It's from MIT. Dimitra blinked. "MIT. Lena opened the email. "Dear Miss Caldwell, we watched your demonstration today with awe. Your mastery of logic and self-derived methodology represents the future of mathematics. We'd be honored to invite you to join our accelerated research mentorship program. Effective immediately. Congratulations, Lena. The world needs minds like yours."
Massachusetts Institute of Technology admissions team.
Dimitra covered her mouth. Lena exhaled, eyes wet but steady. "They saw me, Mom. They finally saw me." Dimitra smiled, through tears. "No, baby," she whispered. "The world finally believed you." Lena tilted her head back, looking at the night sky. For the first time, the stars didn't seem distant. They felt reachable. But as her phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number, the screen flashed a single chilling message. MIT wasn't the only one watching you. The MIT message had barely faded from Lena's screen before another came through, encrypted with no listed sender, only a message. MIT wasn't the only one watching you. Denitra caught the shift in Lena's eyes immediately. What is it? Lena didn't answer. She just turned the phone toward her mother. They stared at the words together, a chill settling between them. It didn't say who or why. It didn't need to. In a world where power felt faceless, the warning spoke volume. Still, it changed nothing, because the tide was already moving, and this time it wasn't moving against them. In the weeks following Lena's public retest, the fallout from the scandal surged beyond anything the state academic board could contain. National networks aired documentaries, civil rights attorneys filed joint class actions, students from across the country, from low-income schools to elite private academies, began checking their own records. And what they found validated everything Lena had exposed. A sweeping national investigation launched within 30 days. Subpoenas flew. Tech contractors who built the Equiscore algorithm were summoned. Whistleblowers came forward in waves. The most damning revelation: the algorithm had flagged over 2,300 students in 5 years, and over 90% were Black, Latino, or students from schools below a certain income threshold. The outcry reached Congress. Within 2 months, the National Board for Academic Excellence was forced to issue a public apology. Its statement read like something peeled from a damage control manual. We recognize that systemic flaws in our review process resulted in unfair outcomes. Effective immediately, Equiscore will be suspended, and an independent equity commission will oversee future contest scoring and evaluations. But the damage was already visible. 6 top officials resigned, multiple lawsuits moved forward, and every academic institution that had relied on Equiscore's recommendations scrambled to explain years of bias. In the center of the storm, Lena stood calm, not because she was unaffected, but because she was already working. MIT's mentorship program took her in immediately. Weekly Zoom calls with leading theorists, private Slack groups with grad-level researchers, one-on-one strategy meetings with professors who now asked her how she solved the unbreakable problems. But that wasn't the victory she cared about most. What mattered more was what came next. Because one morning, Lena received a message from an entirely different source. We'd like your help building the next competition model. From scratch. Transparent. Equitable. Student-centered. You in? It was signed by the newly appointed chair of National Scoring Reform, a woman named Dr. Elise Maduka, a Nigerian-American educator with a reputation for tearing down broken systems and rebuilding them with steel. They wanted Lena not as a participant, but as an architect. The irony wasn't lost on her. She replied instantly. I'm in. Let's rewrite everything. By fall, Lena was flying to DC monthly, sitting in rooms with data scientists, education policy experts, civil rights lawyers, and even high school students like herself, voices that had never been at the table before. She listened, asked hard questions, took notes. She challenged assumptions. And when the time came to present a model, Lena stood in front of the panel and described something revolutionary. A testing framework that didn't just evaluate correct answers, but rewarded innovation. A scoring system that was auditable, public-facing, and included bias indicators. A student feedback loop, so contestants could understand exactly how their score was derived and challenge it if necessary. And above all, no more automated gatekeeping. No algorithm had the right to determine genius. The board voted unanimously to adopt her recommendations. The new system was titled LNA, Learning Evaluation for Neutral Assessment. Back home, Lena stayed grounded. She still helped her classmates with their homework. Still walked past the same school counselor who once told her to let it go. Still read bedtime stories to her little cousin, as if the world hadn't crowned her as a math savant. She knew better than to believe her victories were permanent. But she also knew this. She'd changed something too big to be undone. And the world noticed. Schools began hosting forums on algorithmic fairness. Colleges reached out to reevaluate past rejections. Black and brown students wrote letters, telling Lena that they'd believed the lies about their worth, until she proved those lies couldn't survive sunlight. She kept every letter in a shoebox under her bed. Then came the next surprise. A formal envelope. Elegant, embossed seal. Delivered by hand. Inside. Dear Lena, we are honored to invite you to deliver the keynote address at next year's National Mathematics Championship opening ceremony. It would mean the world to the students, the educators, and to the future of this field to hear from someone who didn't just compete, but transformed what competition means. With gratitude, Dr. Elise Maduka, Chair, National Scoring Reform. Lena stared at the letter for a long time. Denitra, standing nearby, covered her mouth slowly. "You're not just rewriting the rules," she said. "You're being handed the microphone." Lena nodded, blinking back the emotions swelling in her chest. "Do you remember?" she asked, voice soft, "when they said I didn't belong in that room?" Denitra laughed gently. "Now you're opening the door for everyone else." That night, Lena lay in bed, unable to sleep. Not because she was anxious, but because she was imagining the faces of the students who would sit in those chairs next year. Nervous, brilliant, unproven. She didn't want to inspire them. She wanted to arm them. Her mind spun through phrases, stories, sentences. What would she say? What did they need to hear? She got up, grabbed her notebook, and started writing. But as she scribbled the first lines of her speech, her inbox pinged with a new message. Subject: Keynote Coordination. From Speaker, Vilezan, Mathboard.us. Lena, before you finalize your remarks, please note, due to public image concerns, we ask that you avoid language referring to racial bias or systemic discrimination during your speech. We want this year's ceremony to reflect progress, not controversy. Lena stared at the screen and felt the fire return to her chest. Lena stared at the email on her screen, the cursor blinking like it was daring her to respond. Please avoid language referring to racial bias or systemic discrimination during your speech. The words weren't just censorship. They were a warning cloaked in politeness. A request wrapped in regulation. She sat back in her chair, the fire inside her slow burning now, controlled, focused. They had given her the stage. They just didn't want to hear the truth. But Lena Caldwell hadn't come this far to be polite. The day of the opening ceremony arrived with all the polish the national board could muster. Banners hung in the grand rotunda. Cameras clicked. Students from every state in tailored blazers filled the front rows, excitement buzzing through the air like static. The stage was slick and spotlighted, and the host's voice echoed through the room. And now, we welcome a student who changed not only the outcome of last year's championship, but the future of the competition itself. Please join me in welcoming Lena Caldwell. Applause erupted, sustained, genuine, loud. Lena stepped onto the stage in a black suit. No badge this time. Just a small silver pin. Ellie. She approached the podium slowly, looked out over the sea of young faces, some eager, some nervous, a few already doubting themselves before the test even began. Then she began. "I was told not to talk about race today," Lena said, voice calm, mic steady. "I was told it might make people uncomfortable, that it might distract from the celebration of progress." The room quieted. "But I'm standing here because someone once said I didn't belong in this room. And that has everything to do with race, and systems, and silence." A pause. The kind that holds weight. "I was accused, not because I broke the rules, but because I broke their expectations. I wasn't supposed to win. Not with my skin. Not from my school. Not with the zip code attached to my name."
No one clapped. Not yet. They were listening too hard.
"But I didn't come here to talk about revenge. I came to talk about repair." She glanced toward the LA Nana banner behind her. "Because we didn't just challenge a score. We challenged a system that erased people before they had a chance to be seen. We exposed an algorithm designed to flag excellence when it didn't fit the mold." She stepped from behind the podium, walking slowly across the stage. "And now we've built something better. Together." A few students clapped, then more. Lena raised her hand slightly. Silence returned. "I know what some of you are feeling right now. You're thinking, what if I do everything right, and it's still not enough? I thought that too." She stopped. Center stage. "But let me tell you what I learned. Doing it right is not about being accepted. It's about being undeniable." The applause came again. Bigger this time. "I didn't retake that test to convince them I was worthy. I did it so the ones coming next, you wouldn't have to prove you belong in rooms that were built on your backs, and then locked from the inside." Faces across the auditorium lit up, stunned, smiling, tearing up. "And when they tell you not to speak about the obstacles you faced, speak louder, because every word is a brick in the path you're paving for the next voice behind you." She walked back toward the podium. "You are not anomalies. You are not exceptions. You are evidence, and we need every one of you, not just to compete, but to create. Not just to win, but to redefine what winning means. Now the applause surged. No hesitation. Professors stood. Judges stood. Even the same officials who had once called her case an anomaly were forced to rise. Lena closed her eyes for just a second, letting the moment land. Then she smiled. Soft, proud. Thank you. She stepped back. As the applause continued, Lena started walking toward the backstage exit. She passed rows of students, some reaching out to touch her hand, others just whispering thank yous, overwhelmed by what they'd heard. And then she saw her. Front row, second seat from the left. A young black girl, maybe 12, glasses, braided hair, school-issued blazer too big for her shoulders. In her lap a worn notebook covered in tiny equations and graphs, corners bent from use. Her eyes locked with Lena's, and they were shining, not with tears, with fire, with recognition, with a belief that hadn't been there before today. Lena froze, just for a second. Then the girl smiled, small, hopeful, like someone had just handed her a map. Lena smiled back, because she didn't need to say anything. That smile said everything. You belong here. You are not alone. You are next. And as Lena stepped behind the curtain, her phone buzzed again. A new message from an unknown contact. We're building a new national AI model for public education. We want your brain at the center. Call us. We'll follow your lead. If you've ever been told you don't belong, just because of where you're from, how you speak, or the color of your skin, then you already know what Lena felt. And if her fight made you feel something, even for a second, don't let that feeling fade. Type yes if you believe in justice. Subscribe if this broke your heart.